And have a conversation with you today is about a new agreement between Exelis Visual Information Solutions and DigitalGlobe, talking about NV analytics on top of the Geospatial Big Data platform for DigitalGlobe. We're going to be asking you to tweet us questions a little bit later on. We'll be monitoring a live tweet feed about questions about the future, and we're going to be talking about the marketplace, because we think that the growth of the marketplace supports what Michael's talking about, the growth of the society, the growth of the vision for our industry. So with that being said, Kevin, we ready to get going?
Absolutely, let's get started. So thank you everyone for your time. I'm pleased to be here representing DigitalGlobe. Can't wait to tell you about what we're doing with our partners at Exelis on the Geospatial Big Data platform. However, to effectively look forward to the future, we need to have a good baseline for what's happened in the past. So Stuart, can you take it over and give us a bit of context around how we got to where we are today, and then we can launch into where we're going in the future.
Absolutely, Kevin. As you know, the history of remote sensing and photogrammetry is very rich in innovation and science. I was at NASIC last week, and I had the opportunity to go to the Air Force Museum. And I really encourage you to go there because it has such a rich history of aerial photography, innovations, and different platforms for flight, everything from the Corona program to other things. So, you know, for me, what really got me going in remote sensing was back in 1983 when I first got introduced to the concept of imaging spectroscopy. And at the time, I was getting ready to go to graduate school and start working in geology, and I was fortunate enough to work with Harold Lang at JPL. But guys like Alex Getz, Ann Cale, Roger Clark, Robert Green, Fred Kruse, these were the guys that I really looked up to in terms of how they were changing the way we looked at remote sensing, changing the way we looked at the Earth. In 1991, I went to Boulder, Colorado, and went to the first environmental modeling and GIS conference put on by Esri. And I had a chance to listen to Jack Vanderman speak, and it was a turning point for me. Because not only did I see a vision for how to bring environmental modeling and GIS together with remote sensing, I saw a business path forward. Because as much as my interest in science is, I'm also very interested in business. And so looking at what Jack has done with Esri really made me impressed. It made me want to build tools for ArcGIS, which I did. And it made me want to succeed in this marketplace and build a career here. Kevin, I know you've had some experience with Alex.
Sure, absolutely. So I was fortunate to meet Alex at the tail end of his career right before he retired. I was a young undergrad at the University of Colorado. I spent 5 years trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and the 5th year of my undergraduate degree, I took a remote sensing class with Alex, and within the first week I said, you know what, this is what I want to do with my career. I want to be in remote sensing. It blends applied math, science, interesting technology, and it all focuses on a variety of use cases that can make an impact on the world around us. And so I was fortunate to learn kind of the fundamentals under Alex, going to his class, working in his lab, interning with him, and from there apply the skills that I learned through Alex and taking it out to industry. So I kind of got that baseline of knowledge and learning kind of the fundamentals and how to get in and really tweak an image correctly and really process that one single image or even that one single patch of real estate with a few spectral signatures under Alex's tutelage. So that was a great way for me to get my career started. But what we're really here to talk about isn't necessarily just the technology, but also the industry and the growth of the industry and where we see the industry going. So Stuart, I'll kick it back to you to get your thoughts on what you think the future might look like and what the big picture could be.
You're amazing, man. A brother from a different mother. We all have this basic understanding and love. If you go to the next slide, Kevin. Let's talk a little bit about the marketplace and what's going on there. How many of you remember or know Joe Barry? He had a column in GeoWorld called Beyond Mapping, which I used to read every week. I thought that Joe's comments about the way the market was going was really, really impressive. I also noticed that Google had basically solicited a study from the Boston Consulting Group about the potential growth of our marketplace. I mean, look at these numbers, folks. This is huge. This is our space. This is where we are experts in. But if you look at the bottom diagram about what Joe's talking about, we have a cyclical market approach to what we do. And so one of the things that we're looking for as remote sensing and GIS and GPS and analytics all start to evolve on top of the cloud, we really want to get a sense about what the future is going to look like now that we're fully immersed with persistent Earth imaging. We've got a lot of data. And so I'm going to ask Kevin if he could explain a little bit about what that future looks like.
Absolutely, I'd love to, Stuart. So there are many different paths we can take to grow, right? And to this point, we've achieved great accomplishments in the remote sensing industry. We've achieved those accomplishments by leveraging the skills, the technology, the applications, the algorithms that some of our forefathers developed. And that's allowed us to create quite a bit of growth in the industry, right? There are many commercial companies that have grown significantly. There are many programs in the government space that have been very successful. There's a wide breadth of research going on in the academic space. And that gets us to where we are today. It's very exciting, right? But industries go through transitions, industries go through pivots. And we have a series of directions that we could go, right? I'm going to lay these out from my perspective where we could go in the future, right? The first one's bleak. We could disappear, we could perish, right? We could become obsolete. To Michael's point, there could be an instance where other industries come in and take our business. There could be other instances where other companies outside of remote sensing come in and start to do the work that we're doing today. I don't believe that's going to happen. We could continue to do the things that we've done to this point. We could continue to answer the questions that we've approached to this point. We could continue along the path that we've been on. But what's exciting is the opportunity to take that next big kick up, right? And I believe we're at a pivot point. I believe we're at that pivot point where we can go up, but we need to change. We need to do things a little bit differently. We need to ask new questions. To this point, we've asked, show me their questions. We focused on specific locations on the surface of the Earth. We focused primarily on specific times. We need to start asking a new class of questions. No longer is show me there the only class of question we can ask. How about show me where? Show me where things are changing on a global scale, on a continental scale. Show me where I need to focus my attention, right? As a trained image operator, show me where I should actually focus my time on. Instead of focusing on one particular patch of real estate, one particular street corner in a city environment, I want to look at all the cities at the same time and understand how cities are changing over time. We now have the tools to do that. So that's part of what we're excited about, and that's part of what Exelis and DigitalGlobe are bringing to market with this Geospatial Big Data initiative.
Well, Kevin, so help me out here. So what we're talking about is going big, right? Really big. So show me where. I really like that because, I see an untapped market with people like, consumers that are in financial services, the insurance industry, untapped markets for really what we've traditionally used for imagery and so forth. Talk to me about how this platform you're describing, how it looks. Can you show me that?
Absolutely.
Could you show me where it is? Thank you.
I'd show you where as soon as this clicker works. Thank you. Okay, so a real big picture on what we're doing. Okay, I told you I was excited about what we're doing with the Geospatial Big Data Initiative. This is a very high-level view. So when I came to DigitalGlobe a year ago and took on a leadership role within our Geospatial Big Data Initiative, I said, you know what? I'm sick of snacking on data. I'm sick of looking at a single image. I want to look at all the images. DigitalGlobe has collected imagery since 1999 and has been locking that data away in the archive, and no one touches it. We collect terabytes, if not petabytes of data on a yearly basis. And you know how much data actually gets looked at? About 5% of it, right? Because we're focusing on different classes of questions. Show me their questions. You collect an image, it's a 2 gigabyte image. And you know how much of that data actually gets looked at? About 10 megabytes, because what's right at the center is what people are interested in. But guess what? There's a lot of useful information and data around that particular location. So that's really what we're striving to accomplish here with this initiative, is take that data and get it out of jail. Put it up online and enable people to ask useful and interesting questions of that data by throwing the doors open, putting it up in the cloud, and co-locating it with analytic tools that allow you to ask questions of the data. So here's a real quick snapshot of what we're doing. Data comes down, hits the factory, we produce it, push it up online. put it next to our algorithms, put it next to partner algorithms like Exelis, like Esri, other tools that are out there to extract useful information from the data, and then feed that information, that large-scale information, into a variety of applications that make it very easy for users in the insurance industry, for users in the financial services industry, to consume that information. Because right now, the types of questions that those industries want to ask are not show me their type questions, they're show me where, and show me how, and show me when, right? And those are the questions that we need to answer to evolve as an industry. So I reached out to Stuart and said, hey Stuart, here's what we're doing. Do you want to get involved?
And I said to Kevin, look, brother, I'm all over this because, you know, one of the things, as we talked about with Fred Kruse and others, there's 30 years of algorithms locked up in Envy and all these analytical tools. How do we get to a larger distribution besides just image scientists? How do we essentially go away from just processed pixels to information products that people want subscriptions for and want to buy? I think, hey, if I was your age, which I'm not, I would want to go out and start 10 new companies around this thing. So let's get going. Show me where. Come on, let's go on this thing.
Cool. So I appreciate your excitement, Stuart.
I'm fired up.
I'm hoping that we're creating some excitement.
Help me out here, people. We need some tweening going on here. Come on.
So here's what we're going to do. We've got some show me where questions that we're going to be talking through. Okay, some examples of what do Kevin and Stuart really mean by show me where. So we're going to walk through a couple of those. But we're also interested to hear from you. Okay? We want to have a conversation. We want to dig into what are the classes of questions that can now be addressed if you take the limitations of data and lower that barrier almost to zero. Right? So I encourage you to go online. I see some of you have your computers open. I'm really happy about that. Those of you who have mobile phones, take those out. You don't normally hear that from a speaker. Take your phone out. Get online.
I'm getting some, oh man, I'm on fire right here, right now.
Fantastic. If you're on Twitter, go online. Go on Twitter, #GeoBigData, ask a question. Amanda will be fielding some of these questions, and at the end of the talk, we're going to sort through some of them in a conversation type environment. Okay, so I challenge you, pose some hard questions to us. What class of question can we address if you lower the barrier to access to compute environments, data, and tools? Right? The data, the jail's been broken open. Right?
Let's do this thing.
Let's do it. Cool. So let's get started with some of the questions that we want to talk through to kind of stimulate some creative thinking. Sound good?
I'm on it. Let's do it.
All right. So, question for you, Stuart. If there's a polio outbreak in Africa, where do you send vaccines?
Well, I want to know where the villages are. I want to know, kind of how to get to the villages. I want to understand if there's some maps there that help me get to that, and if there's not, how do I get those answers to get those people in safely?
Gotcha. So this is how we go about addressing that type of question. And here are some of the challenges that still exist that you and the crowd can actually help us answer. Okay. So this is one of the major metro areas in Nigeria, Lagos, Nigeria. Right? You can see the satellite image there on the left. You can see OpenStreetMaps on the right. You can see in OpenStreetMaps, it's pretty well described. And OpenStreetMaps, for those who aren't familiar, is one way to tap into open map data. Right? And so this is oftentimes a way that USAID will find how to get from point A to point B. They'll use something like OpenStreetMaps. They might also use it to infer the population density of a location, right? So if you know how many people live at a particular location, you know how many resources to send there. And that isn't just for humanitarian relief efforts. That could also be for commercial entities who want to sell their products and services in the emerging world, right? They want to know where people live, so they know how much resources to send there to support the needs of that population. So OpenStreetMaps is a great data source for this use case in major metro areas. However, when you start looking at 3 hours down the road from Lagos, there's a remote village, right? And a couple hundred people live there, right? When you look on OpenStreetMaps, there's no representation of that location, right? It's literally not on the map, okay? The data are there to find that village, but it hasn't been mapped yet. That's a 0% solution for that village. They have no representation on OpenStreetMaps. We can do better, right? The data are there. We need to find those people. We need to map their village so that they can get the services they need to live a more fulfilling life. Another example is this other village, an hour down the street. You can see that all we have are placemates. There are no streets, there are no structures. All we know is that something exists there. If I'm a USAID worker and I need to get out to that location, I don't have much information on those two villages. We're talking about hundreds of people here. And all it takes is somebody in the crowd to tap into that data and even come up with a 50% solution. Right? 50% is better than 0. We don't need to strive for a 100% solution. The 100% solution would be great, but that's really hard. If we can get to a 50% solution, a 70% solution, it's going to make an impact on these people's lives.
So Kevin, this is really interesting because if I was at the Gates Foundation and I've made it myself a mission to eradicate polio, I would want to be able to tap into these types of analytics because when I send people out, I want to know not only where the villages are, which I can get into, but I'm also interested in security issues as well. They just had a recent election in Nigeria. Boko Haram is operating in the north. So potentially, could we use these types of analytics to also help folks like the Gates Foundation, USAID to understand, is a village still there? These types of things. Does imagery support that?
You bet. So one of the benefits here is the historical view, right? To be able to look back in time and see how things are changing over time. Sure, maybe there is a village, and maybe it is mapped on OpenStreetMaps, but maybe a significant change has occurred. Right? Maybe the city's grown, maybe it's shrunk. Maybe there is, some form of civil uprising and an outside warring party has come in and burned the village to the ground. Those are all things that we would want to know about, and it's captured in the data. We just need to think about the right way to apply analytics to the data to squeeze that information out so these types of organizations can.
Hey, I've got a suggestion as well. Since you've got to click around and swap places, you might be closer to the mind of the computer. Plus, I got a chance to say hello to the good folks over here. I'll be here all week, by the way, anyway. So my next show is at 3 o'clock this afternoon.
So, Stuart, I have a question for you now.
So
you get to tackle this.
I love it.
Okay.
Is the spotlight on me?
So here we have China.
China
Okay. is one example of a.
Make it a good one.
It's a foreign country, as we all know.
Yeah.
And let's say we want to understand, not only from a perspective of China, but just countries around the world, how their natural resource reserves are changing over time.
Okay.
Right? This could have implications for a variety of use cases. But let's just say we want to monitor their resources over time.
Okay. Brain cells work here. Okay, so we just saw an example with OpenStreetMaps how we could use GIS data combined with remote sensing to help localize our search and to understand really what's on the ground. So I would think that I would probably start with sedimentary basin outlines, use those to essentially look for infrastructure for supporting oil and gas production, right? And then going in there and either doing change analysis. What would be really cool is if I could actually measure some of the production. So for example, let's say there was an embargo going on. Could I understand whether changes are going on or not in that production cycle? Is that even possible?
I think it is.
Really?
I think it is, but I'm no photogrammetrist.
Okay.
There's a couple in the crowd.
Probably have a couple in the crowd who are photogrammetrists. We might get some help from the audience on this one.
Okay. So this is a method that's been investigated in the past, right, on a very localized, show-me-there type approach. Photogrammetry can be used to measure shadows on geometric objects to understand height.
That is cool.
Right?
That is cool.
It's very cool. So we can begin to understand the fill level of these storage tanks on a very localized basis, right? So it's useful to understand how much a single storage tank is filled. However, from a macro scale, that's where it really starts to get interesting. If you can at least look at a statistically significant representation of the storage tanks around an entire country, you can begin to make inferences. Is it going up or going down? Right?
Say what?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Imagine that.
Oh man, I'm loving this stuff. Quantitative remote sensing, statistics, providing those as information products. I think there's a market for this.
I agree, but the thinking has to change slightly.
Okay.
Okay, so there will always be a certain range of error with these measurements, and the error will increase the more storage tanks you address, the more storage tanks you look at. We might even get to the point where the accuracy is plus or minus 15%, 20%.
dude, give it to me big, give it to me a little bit messy, but I need analytics. I can live with that.
You got it.
Okay.
So another natural resource type question that we might want to look at here is, are there any environmental issues at play here?
I love this one. This is what I call enrichment of an analytics, right? So one of the things we talked about, we've been looking at a lot of visible spectrum examples of what's going on. When we start thinking about the super spectral capabilities of worldview 3 and what this world is going to look like, now we start thinking about how do we enhance analytics to go beyond the visible spectrum and actually look for anomalies such as this. So what we're seeing on the right is the methane leaks coming from these tanks. So what if I'm an entrepreneur that says, you know what, I'm going to start to create some analytics where I'm going out and I've identified infrastructures and I'm going to monitor all of the methane leaks going out of these tanks. Do we have any attorneys here, any lawyers? Good. Because I got a feeling that if I've got a methane leak going on in an area, I'm probably going to get a letter from the local attorney about this. So here's a new business. Go out and monitor environmental leaks from oil and gas infrastructures, sell that service to oil and gas companies. Why am I giving this away? I mean, is this what this is all about?
Yeah, let's do
I'm just a good... Sorry, let's do this.
You and I can start.
All right, let's start doing this.
I
like it.
Cool. All right, let's jump to the next one here. So this final example of a show me where type use case is all focused around civil uprising in Syria. So what was found in leading up to the uprising in Syria is there was an influx in young males in the major metro areas, specifically Damascus. And all of these young males came into the city and they were upset and they were looking for jobs, they had no money, and that kind of had a snowball effect. And it created fear and anger within the people of Damascus. And that unfortunately led to a very unfortunate set of circumstances that continue today. But the question is, what really led up to that? What drove those young males into the city? Well, as it turns out, there's a hypothesis that agricultural production in the rural lands was down. And what happens in some of these countries is when people in rural zones are not making the money to sustain their families, they take a select few members of their family and they send them into the city to go make money to send back to the families so that they can survive. So the correlation here is, or the hypothesis here is, if agricultural production goes down, people get upset. When people get upset and need money, they send their family members into the city. When a bunch of angry young males come into the city, bad things happen. So low agricultural production, bad things happen. So if we can begin to understand and see the signals ahead of time to anticipate that something bad is going to happen, there are a lot of people who want to know about that kind of information. So we did a little bit of work digging into this to say, hey, looking back through the data, all the data in a very localized region in southwest Syria, can we begin to tease out that signal? Can we begin to see changes in agricultural production that can help us to anticipate these types of scenarios? So we all know that satellite imagery is really great for measuring vegetation health, and vegetation health is directly linked to agricultural production. So what we did here was dig into a very localized region to study a series of individual fields. Now I say individual fields, we're not looking at the yield or the production of that particular field, rather we want to know from a statistically relevant perspective how an entire region is doing. So we looked at a sampling of fields all around this one region and then collapsed that vegetation health information down to a few very representative statistics to say, based on this information, based on this statistically relevant sampling, how are these regions doing from an agricultural production standpoint? And we saw some interesting results, right? We saw that agricultural production, in fact, was down in those years leading up to the uprising. It was down the years before young males were heading into the city, right? Now, this was only done on a localized region. It wasn't done across a long period of time or across a wide geographic region. But that's the kind of question that you and the audience can begin to think about. Stuart, what do you think about that question?
Well, that's really cool for a number of reasons. You know, on the front page of the New York Times yesterday was a story about what's called the River of Life in Iran. And that river is dry. There's a bridge, famous bridge here, the Bridge of 33 Arches, and there's no water running under that bridge. So if I were to do some analysis thinking about the whole hydrogeologic cycle within that area and the villages associated with it, I might want to be thinking about impacts on global security due to impending drought within the Middle East. There's also a lot of correlations with, obviously, I don't know if you're aware of this, Kevin, but there's a lot of hydroelectric dam building that's gone on in Turkey over the last 15 years, which is where the watersheds are. So again, if we start to tie these together with the use of imagery and analytics, I think we're onto something.
I think you're right. It all comes down to information.
It really does.
Right, it all comes
and the way we present it,
Yep.
in a timely manner.
You got it. Okay, so we've walked through a few show me where type questions. Again, hashtag GeoBigData, ask your question online. We'll be fielding a couple at the end of the talk. Pivoting into the next portion of our conversation are some of the companies that we feel are starting to look at these show me where questions, that are starting to think macro scale, and are starting to look at imagery simply as a source of data that they can use to answer new and innovative questions. So I thought that this would be useful to help drive your thinking, to kind of look at, okay, I see where he's going, but how do we really apply it? Or who are some innovators in industry that are actually doing this to bring the concept forward? So we teased out a couple that we'd like to talk about, but there are many more. This certainly is not a comprehensive list. So, Stuart, you've been in the industry for a long time. How much does the insurance industry use spectral remote sensing data and advanced image processing analytics software?
You know, I think they've just dabbled in it in the sense where we've looked at the roofing materials near national forests where there's high fuel loads to understand what houses might be at risk for bursting into flames under intense forest fire conditions. So there's some general awareness of that, but I think they haven't even begun to tap the potential of what we're talking about.
I agree. They have a lot, the insurance industry has a lot of hard problems that they try to address. And unfortunately, they don't have the time and resources, from my estimation, to pour their time into understanding the right spectral band combinations to look at.
They sure got the money, because I just looked at my last premium increase, and it's like, come on, are you kidding me?
So one company that I think is looking at this industry in a really innovative way is this small company out of Colorado called Exelis. So this is a couple of I'd say maybe a dozen geospatial experts that have decades of experience each and of themselves. And what they want to do is they want to disrupt the insurance industry. They don't want to sell them software or position themselves as the imagery, like a professional services type engagement where they come in and they're for hire, contractors to process data for them. They believe that by selling broad global scale, or at least country scale information layers, they can change the way that the insurance industry does business. So let me tell you a little bit about how the insurance industry does business today. One thing that insurance companies are particularly interested in are where are parcels that are changing that we've insured where the policyholder hasn't come to us and told them that we made an improvement to that parcel.
I got one of those. Keep going, I'm sorry.
We're going to find you. All right. We're going to find, these guys are going to find you. The way that they find you today is they send guys out with clipboards to go look at each individual parcel, peek over your fence, and see if there's been an improvement to that property, right? And they do that on about a decade cycle. It's very time-consuming, it's very expensive, and it's very inefficient. If you make any changes over a decade, they're not going to pick it up. So Exegenesis sees this guy as the competitor. The guy with the clipboard is what they're trying to remove from the equation. Okay? And they've got a really interesting, innovative approach. They take imagery and look at it from a pretty wide scale. This is one particular example in a county in North Carolina. Tie that imagery to parcel data sets. That's high-resolution imagery. Tie that to parcel data sets, and then run many of the statistical processing and mathematical algorithms that we've all developed in this crowd to set a baseline for what structures and what features are in that parcel. Okay? Set a statistical baseline, and then each time a new image is collected, run those same processes to create the same statistical representation of that parcel and look for rough scale changes. If there's a dramatic change on that parcel, tag that parcel and send the guy out with the clipboard at that point, right? Now the guy with the clipboard is not looking at 100 parcels, he's looking at 4. Do you think that's going to be more efficient? Absolutely. And it's okay to be less than perfect, right? You can set your threshold really low, allow some false alarms to come in, and that's okay. Because if that guy with the clipboard was going to go out and look at 100 and we send him out to look at 10, just save the company a ton of money. Okay? So this is kind of one way of thinking, and we're going to find you, Stuart.
I like that. I like the efficiency. Just as a little side note on that one, I've actually seen state and local governments come to me because as they start to fly more statewide LiDAR data, and the LiDAR data becomes higher spatial resolution, it's not only the 2D footprint, Kevin, it's the 3D footprint that they're looking for in changes in houses. Did I add on another building on my second story, Greg, to essentially, make my property value go up? So these are the things that they're looking for to essentially drive more revenue, because state and local governments, as we've seen, need more revenue to keep up with all the demands of the public. Just a little pearl of wisdom for you, my friend.
Fantastic. All right, so jump into our next industry. So, Stuart, if I was able to tell you how a company is going to perform from a quarterly revenue standpoint before anybody else could, is that something you'd be interested in?
Dude, I would be playing my ukulele with Warren Buffett if that happened.
Well, we, the remote sensing industry, are collecting data all around the world that can be used to infer the growth or the downturn of certain industries.
Seriously.
Seriously. We just don't have enough eyeballs to look at all that imagery, right? So I want to tell you about a company called Orbital Insight. They're a small startup out of the Bay Area. And for all intents and purposes, they're a remote sensing analytics company. They're not here today. They're over at TechCrunch. They're at like these startup incubator conferences, because they're more of a Bay Area startup view than a traditional remote sensing view. However, they use more data than probably anybody in this room, arguably. They are using over a terabyte of satellite imagery every quarter to measure the financial performance, or to predict the financial performance of big box retailers. And let me show you how they're doing this. They're taking huge volumes of satellite imagery and, they're not flying it around the world. They're taking huge volumes of satellite imagery and counting the number of cars in front of big box retailers all around North America, okay? And they've taken the location of Target, Walmart, Cabela's, and they've looked at the number of cars that were parked in front of those stores over a 5-year period and correlated that information with quarterly revenue performance. So they've developed a very tight correlation between quarterly revenue performance and number of cars on a macro scale in front of these big box retailers. Okay? So they don't actually look at the imagery. They really don't. They can't look at a terabyte of imagery. They don't know people. They can't even look at the car detections, right? All they really look at are these plots, right? This is a cartoonish representation of the plot, but what they're looking at is that correlation between macro scale car counts in front of various big box retailers and how that correlates with the revenue performance on a quarterly basis. Okay? So by doing that, as we collect more data and feed this into their model, they can see how the number of cars is changing over time, and they can begin to infer, hey, this company has actually got a lot more customers coming through the door than they did last quarter or the same quarter a year ago. So we think that they're selling more, so we think their revenue is going to go up. And so then they sell that information to Morgan Stanley. So Morgan Stanley can then go make a buy decision. Or vice versa. Hey, Target is not selling as much, they don't have as much customers coming through the door, so don't buy that, it's a sell. Right? So it's a new way of thinking about it, right? They're collecting lots of information from satellite image data, but they never look at it as a picture, it's simply a source of data. Right? To Michael's introductory points, it's part of the Internet of Things. They take car counts in conjunction with promotions and weather data and seasonal patterns, and all that information comes into their model,